Hey everybody, this is Steven from PopCultureMaven.com. We're back, finally, with, I can't even say this week's comic reviews. Hopefully you all had a good holiday. I took some time off, family and friends. And then the plan was to hopefully get those 2 weeks of comics in one review and then get back to what would be when you see this video last week's new comics. And as always, best laid plans don't always work out. So it was just one of those things. I got really busy with the holidays and everything, and did get a chance to record the video. Did get a chance to read the books, and then so I didn't review those books, and then another week came in. So we're gonna go. I'm gonna try to go through these fairly quickly. There's a fair amount, but fortunately for basically the 3 weeks, there was some really good books and a fair amount, but kind of smaller weeks. So this actually is almost, even though it's 3 weeks, it's almost like one big week. But there was quite a few, so let's just get going. First off, we have Bylines Blood #1, written by Erica Schultz and Van Jensen, with artwork by Aniki. So this is kind of an interesting setup to the story. So what the structure of it is it's a basic murder mystery, which always is kind of an easy thing to do because then you can tell another story, and that's what this one's kind of doing. So it's what's interesting is it's ironic that it's kind of a social commentary about newspaper and news and politics and all that kind of stuff that plays into it, because as we know, because of the internet and everything else, and YouTube and TikTok and all this stuff, that we don't consume news like we used to. We would read the newspaper back in the day, that you would watch the news, and now with 24-hour news and stuff. So that's what I really have to give Schultz and Jensen a really, it's interesting because they use the social commentary of current news focus and everything, and they wrap it in this murder mystery. So what it is there's a private detective who, she does jobs and everything. And so what it is there was a newspaper, a guy who ran a newspaper, and she worked for him. That was one of her first jobs. So she loved to dig in, get dirt on like politicians who were bad and things like that. And then she kind of went off on her own way, and he ran the paper, and then the paper folded. And then, so what it is he was murdered. And so his daughter hires her to find out what has happened. And that's the basic premise in this first issue. And it's one of those stories that I would not say that I was like, oh my God, this was amazing. But it's one of those that it really kind of, it sticks its landing quite well. It's one of those, I say it kind of aims for the middle and hits it. It doesn't try to be more than it is, which I think in its case is actually very, very beneficial. It doesn't try to be bigger than the story it's setting up, and that's always a smart move. The other good thing it's got going for it is Niki's artwork, which is actually really quite nice, because it's pretty much dialogue. It's the talking heads thing where people are pretty much standing around. There's very little action in this, at least in this first issue, and does a really nice job of bringing that dialogue and that, somewhat dry talking heads to life. And that's what you need a good artist to be able to do that. So once again, like I said, I wasn't really necessarily overwhelmed with it, but I did like it. And it definitely gave me enough to want to read the second issue to kind of see where they take it. Next up, we have Monkey Meat #1 by Juni Ba, written and drawn by Juni Ba. So this one is really hard to review because in a lot of ways it's kind of it's a weird stream of conscious type thing. I would say if you're, it reminds me of more personal works like Jim Manifold, and say when Bill Sienkiewicz did like Stray Toasters, where there's this. So basically, there's this island, and I don't even know how to describe it because it's so out there, where they use souls to make other things, and it's really weird. And in some ways, I don't know that I quite understood everything that Ba was trying to get across there, but in a weird way, I kind of liked it. It's definitely really out there. It's certainly very far from the mainstream, and it's certainly going to have a very, very small audience. But I think it's also one of those things I actually appreciate the fact that even though the basic structure of the story of the island and the monkeys and all the weird stuff that kind of goes on does make sense, I think there's just a weird ethereal thing that kind of goes on with it. And like I said, it's just really hard to review because it's a mix of linear and non-linear storytelling that just kind of slams together. And then what really makes it kind of amazing in a way is just the visual artwork that he does for the book. And it's a book that kind of smacks you in the face, but like not in a bad way. It's one of those, I don't know how it's going to land with people. I mean, it landed pretty well with me, but I know one of the other people at the shop that she reads a lot of comics, it didn't land for her very well. So I think it's going to be one of those things. I think if you're definitely looking for something out there and weird and different, I would definitely check it out. But if you're more of a mainstream person, it's definitely not going to be your cup of tea. Next up, we have Stray Dogs, Dog Days, #1, written by Tony Fleece with artwork by Trish Forstner. So hot on the heels of probably, you could at this point, 2021's biggest surprises was Stray Dogs, and it was huge. I mean, there were so many printings of the book, and it was really surprisingly a good book. And in a lot of ways, it was like horror meets Don Bluth, in the sense of it would be like an animated Don Bluth movie that was a horror. So what there's going to be 2 of these. They're thicker books. So the Dog Days. So there's short stories about the dogs that were in the kidnapper slash murderer's house. And so what these stories do is they tell the stories of the dogs before they were kidnapped, kind of what their story was, their backstory. Because in the main structure of the Stray Dogs mini series, that really is irrelevant of their backstory. So I think what this is they have all these characters. If you had read this, you kind of know them, and then there's just little backstories. I will say that even if you haven't read the Stray Dogs, you could actually read this, because they're little short stories that stand on their own. So it's interesting. I mean, obviously it would help if you had read Stray Dogs, but I think if you had read Stray Dogs, this is kind of a nice little, it's kind of weirdly warm and fuzzy. I mean, it's still dark. It has the dark horror aspect to it, but it kind of has a warm fuzzy thing going on too. So it's really interesting. And Fleece is just really, he's really struck upon a really good formula here with this story, and Forstner's artwork just continues to, like, she really captures that look of animation, but she also understands that there is the horror aspect to it. So once again, this book selling like hotcakes, and it was just a lot of fun. I'm really a big fan of short stories, and this was really just a nice I don't want to say finale. It's more of a prequel, really. So, but it's definitely worth picking up, especially if you're a big Stray Dogs fan, and it was wonderful. Next up, we have Batman: One Dark Knight, #1, written and drawn by Jock. So I have been a really huge fan of Jock's artwork throughout the years. He's really done some amazing work. Obviously he's done a lot of Batman work. So it's always interesting when when an artist it's their first time in writing. A good example is like George Perez. He had drawn for so long, and of course, for honestly, he co-wrote Teen Titans with Marv Wolfman after a certain point. Marv was still the writer, but George was definitely a storyteller. So, but this is Jock on his own, and it's interesting because as I'm reading through the book, I found it interesting, but there wasn't quite a hook. It was, so what it is they're transferring a prisoner from Arkham Asylum to this new facility that's more like a Star Labs prison. That's kind of the basic way to describe it. So where there's a superpowered villain that can go, basically his thing is if he goes off like an EMP, it's like all the electricity goes out. So they're taking him, and then and Batman's following the Batjet and everything. So I'm reading this and I'm like, okay, this is okay. It's not, it's okay and everything. And then when I get to the end of the story, so basically what he has done, and I kind of have to say, it's use your influences, because that's what a lot of people do. It ends up being a lot like the film The Warriors. So what it is there's these different fractions of villain gangs they know that this prisoner is going to be transferred, and they know, hey, follow Batman, because that's how you're going to find out where he is. So that's what it is. And I think when I got to the end of the story, I'm like, okay, that's what he's doing. It's not that it was bad. It was just kind of like a basic structure up to that point until he hit what he put in for the twist, which is like the Warriors, where the Warriors have to go get back to their territory and also get through all the other gangs. And that's what the basic structure of the story. Now, I will say once again, I wouldn't say it's the most brilliant story I've ever read, but it's a decent story. I think it'll be more interesting with the next issue, where he kind of fleshes it out, and Batman has to kind of use, because he's now dragging this villain because the EMP went off, and so there's that. And like I said, the really big win for this book is obviously Jock's artwork, which is really, really wonderful and everything. I wouldn't say it necessarily bowled me over, but I did enjoy it, and I think it may not be the strongest of the Black Labels, but it's definitely worth checking out. I didn't find it to be terrible or anything. It was actually pretty decent once it hit its thing. Next up, we have Elektra, Black, White, and Blood #1. So there's 3 stories in here. So the first one's written by Charles Soule with artwork by Mark Bagley and John Dell. Then the second story is written and drawn by Leonardo Romero. And then the third story is written by Declan Shelvey with artwork by Simone D'Armani. So obviously Marvel has discovered, hey, we can do these black and white books, black and white, or black and white in color, or in this case, they're doing black, white with red or blood. They've done Wolverine, they've done Deadpool, they've did Venom. So now we have Elektra. So honestly, with these, every issue is going to be completely different, because you're going to have completely different creative teams. But when you have a first issue of these, I feel that you really need to step off with your best foot forward. And unfortunately, I really wasn't overwhelmed with any of the stories. The Soule Bagley one was okay. I think the only one that I think actually felt like it did something interesting with Elektra was the Romero one, which was really interesting. How it's that how when she kills somebody, that there is actually somewhat there's things left over. And I don't really want to give anything away, but it was probably, to me, the favorite of the story. Although I like the concept of the Shelvey D'Armani story, and the artwork on that one's really, really wonderful. I really did like it, but I think that it just like it wasn't as well paced as I would have liked for a short story. So in the end, I wasn't really particularly overwhelmed with it. I don't think they were bad stories, but none of them really like, oh my God, that was really good. So it was kind of a disappointment. So it'll be interesting to see if the second issue has a little bit bit stronger short stories in it. Next up, we have Swamp Thing, the Green Hell #1, written by Jeff Lemire with artwork by Doug Mankey. So this is, as we've seen, there was a recent Swamp Thing series. This is completely separate. This is a black label series, and Lemire has gone post-apocalyptic again. It seems like a lot of these black label books are post-apocalyptic. But what's interesting is how I think how Lemire handles Swamp Thing, because Lemire has written Swamp Thing before. Because he did it back when the New 52, when he was writing Animal Man, there was a crossover with Swamp Thing. And so, but for me, Swamp Thing is a really amazing character. And I think the thing for me is like, can you bring something new and exciting, but still keep him as Swamp Thing? And I think Lemire has done this here, because it's very, it definitely doesn't rely on the Ween Bernie Wrightson original. It doesn't really rehash any of the Alan Moore or even the later stuff. This definitely stands on its own, but I think the really amazing thing is how he's using Swamp Thing as kind of more of a creature instead of like Swamp Thing. And I think that's really was very interesting, because that is kind of a very unusual take on the character. And then you have Mankey's artwork, which is really gorgeous here. And you just have a big winner with this book. It really is wonderful. And I think the way Lemire writes it and then Mankey draws it, and how this is like a more of a creature instead of like the Holland or Swamp Thing, is really intriguing. So I really enjoyed this. And this is, as you know, I'm a huge fan of Lemire's work, and he just really nails this. I really enjoyed this, and I'm so excited to see where he takes this story. Next up, we have Ms. Marvel Beyond the Limit #1, written by Samara Ahmed, with artwork by Andres Genolet. So this is, it's kind of hard for me, because Ms. Marvel's so much G. Willow Wilson, and she's always going to be a hard act to follow. But what I did like about this book is it was a good all ages book, and I think she's a really strong character, and I really love that G. Willow Wilson has created a great character that other people have been able to build on what she created. And it's one of those books, it didn't overwhelm me or anything like that, but then I'm not necessarily in a way the audience, the really big audience that this book is really aimed for, which is an all ages book. And I think in that level it really works. And I think it's got a solid story. It's got really nice artwork, but it's just not something. It's not that deep and everything. But Ahmed captures the charm of Kamala, and just the humor of it and all, and it really is a nice book. And the artwork by Genolet is really nice. It's just, for me, it didn't overwhelm me, but that's fine, because I like I said, it's not necessarily a wheelhouse book for me, but I definitely appreciate it. And I think it's good that Marvel is putting this book out, because I think having good all ages books out there is very, very important. So in that respect, if you have maybe younger readers and stuff, definitely pick up this book. It's really solid in that respect. Next up, we have One Star Squadron #2, written by Mark Russell, with artwork by Steve Lieber. I'm really enjoying this book, because what it is the one thing that Russell does very, very well, and we'll talk about another book that he's got a little later, but he does social commentary, but he also, like, this isn't so much social commentary per se. It does have a little bit of a social commentary about superheroes in general, and more so about big superheroes, because obviously so this one Star Squadron is run by Red Tornado. But what's really interesting, and we see it in this issue, is how he is able to take these characters that are just really third and fourth rate type characters and really give them like a story. Like this issue really centers on Minuteman, and it's just amazing because it's so much more about the person of Minuteman than his powers and what he can and cannot do. And it's really interesting. And I think the other intriguing thing is how he's given such an amazing voice to Red Tornado, because Red Tornado has really not been well used ultimately in comics overall. And I think Russell is actually he's actually created a character here in Red Tornado where he's a robot, but he really captures that he has that human side to him. And I find it really intriguing. And like this issue just was so amazing because it really is such a character driven story, and yet they're characters that you don't really know, and they're like I said, third and fourth rate characters. So this book is really wonderful. I'm really it's knocking my socks off. This is definitely a must buy, and you really need to be checking this out. Next up, we have Catwoman Lonely City #2, written and drawn by Cliff Chang. I loved the first issue, and of course, my expectations for a second issue were high or higher after reading that first issue. And I can tell you right now, Chang he just, like he set a bar in the first issue, and he just blew past that bar in the second issue. So it's just, I love how he's got Selina. She's broken out of prison, or she's not broken. She got released from prison. She's old. She's, her legs are shot and everything, and yet she needs to pull off this job. And she's got Killer Croc, who I love his Killer Croc. His Killer Croc is amazing. And I just love how he is taking these characters and putting them in this, like, they're not old and washed up. They're old, but that they're trying to survive, and they're surviving the only way they know how. And I think that's what's interesting about the story. And then you have Harvey Dent is the mayor, and there's obviously there's something going on there. We see a little bit more of that in this issue, and it's just it's really amazing. And the story is just really stunning, and the artwork is just I mean, he's a great artist, and he's really like Paper Girls is great and everything, but this is some of his best work. This is a great book. This is really stunning work, and it definitely is a must buy. Next up, we have World of Krypton #2, written by Robert Venditti with artwork by Michael Avon Oeming. So the first issue I actually kind of liked. I think that there have been stories about Krypton, but not that many. And what's interesting here is what Venditti is doing, where he's really talking about the House of El, General Zod, and all these characters that but he's putting them in this story that is really, I mean, we know the Krypton's going to blow up. We know all the things that come later, but he's going back to before that, and he's taking what we know and then developing elements that fit into that the story that we know. But he's leading up to, like, okay, we know that General Zod's going to turn bad, but like, was he always bad? What did he do? How did he kind of get from point A to point B? We also see in this issue the emergence of Jor-El creating the Phantom Zone. And once again, I think it's really interesting, and I don't want to give anything away, how the Phantom Zone came about, and how Jor-El's reaction to the Phantom Zone was. And it's that part of the story was really amazing. And then Oeming is just really, I love his style and everything, and I think his visual style really fits the story, and Vendetti's really taking that to heart and just really just letting him do his things visually to enhance that story that he's writing. And it's really, this has been a surprisingly good book. I'm really enjoying it. So I think it's worth checking out. Next up, we have Dark Knights of Steel, number 3, written by Tom Taylor with artwork by Yasmin Putri. So once again, this is like an Elsewhere type story where it's, you have all the, so far we have quite a few of the DC characters in medieval times, and because that's when, so we have Jor-El, we have his wife, we have Kal-El, we have Bruce Wayne, that now we know there's a bit of a secret about Bruce Wayne. I will not spoil that, but we kind of have a funny feeling he's related somehow. And they've introduced Black Lightning, Supergirl. So it's all these things that Taylor he's doing. He's playing with all these elements of these characters that we know and kind of turning them on. Like, in a way, it's not that Supergirl's like a villain or anything, but he's using her very differently, which is very intriguing. And I think that's what's interesting, that he is taking these characters that we all know very, very well, and he's putting them in a different situation. Like, Black Lightning's the king, and there was, he made an assassination attempt on the House of El, and it kind of worked, but it kind of didn't. And now there's ramifications. It's the Amazons are now involved, so that's Wonder Woman, and it's really interesting how he's kind of playing, he's juggling all these characters and just putting them in different situations. It's really kind of this has really been a big surprise book, because it's not something you expect, and that's what a good writer does. And then you have Putri's artwork, which is just gorgeous. This is a really good looking book. And once again, we have another surprise where it's just something that it kind of flew under the radar and has been really, really surprising. So that, once again, it's well worth checking out. Next up, we have Human Target number 3, written by Tom King with artwork by Greg Smallwood. So Christopher Chance has been poisoned. He's got 12 days to figure out. So we know. So this issue, he gets involved with Guy Gardner. Guy Gardner's not really happy because he's hanging out with his quote unquote, he thinks it's his girlfriend Ice, but she kind of dumped his ass a long time ago. But we also get to see Booster Gold. So Booster is now a bagel. He's starting a bagel restaurant. Go figure. No surprise with Booster, and that is not turning out well. But no surprise. But what I love is how King is really capturing that essence of the Giffen DeMatteis era of the Justice League International, and and just rolling that into the story. And he really just, like, especially his guy, he really nails Guy Gardner just being a complete dick, but yet you kind of like him, and this book is so good. And King is just really, he is just, every book he is doing right now is just really great. And I'm glad that he's doing these side books instead of, now I loved his Batman run, but I'm glad he's doing all these things, because it's really allowing him to take these characters and really run with it and do different things. And it's just absolutely amazing. And then Greg Smallwood's art, it's stunning. It really captures that kind of 50s visual vibe, that Art Deco style that the story kind of has going for it. Even though it's set in the present time, it just visually works, and it's a gorgeous looking book. Beyond, you'll have this great story, Smallwood's artwork is just freaking amazing. This is a gorgeous book, and once again, a must read. Big pick. Next up, we have Refrigerator Full of Heads, number 3, written by Rio Yoris with artwork by Tom Fowler and Craig Taufer. So this is definitely a sequel to A Basket Full of Heads, but I think you can if you haven't read that, I think you can read this, because they do make mention of the events in basket full of heads, but I think there's enough there to explain. But yours is taking what was started there and building on it quite nicely. This is part of the Hill House universe of horror comics, and it's just really interesting how he's weaving a new story into the one that previously was there about the axe that when you cut people's heads off, they still live. And so obviously the last issue they didn't kill the biker gang, they cut their heads off. And so one of them has been trying to, has been traveling back to the mob king, as you would, I guess we could put it. And it's just, there's some really just bizarre, weird, dark humor in there, and it's just really, this is really a wild issue with that. But we also kind of learned about why the mob guy is looking for the three pieces of, the sword, the axe, and then there's another piece. So there's a reason, because apparently when you put them together, you're granted godlike power theoretically. So we'll see, but they're missing one of the pieces. They have two. So that's what kind of happens in this issue. Once again, really interesting. I really love it. I like the horror aspect. I like the kind of bizarre dark humor of it. Fowler's artwork is really, really nice here. If you're a horror fan, these are definitely worth checking out. I'm really enjoying it. It'll be interesting to see where it all lands, because it's been a really good ride so far. Next up, we have Arkham City, The Order of the World, number 4, written by Dan Waters with artwork by Danny. So this continues the Ten-Eyed Man's theory of that Gotham is actually Arkham Asylum as a whole. That's the way Arkham built theoretically Arkham Asylum. That's why he put it where it is, and how everything in Gotham kind of revolves around that. And it's really interesting. And I have to give Walters, he's really, I love the fact that he's kind of using not big Batman villains in this piece, and that the psychiatrist is actually the heroine of this story, and yet she was the ones like, not that she thought these people were crazy, but she's actually starting to like see how this may be actually true, that the ten-eyed man may have stumbled onto this whole thing, and then now Azrael's involved, and it's just getting weird and crazy, and once again, another surprising book out of DC. This has been a really nice surprise. I think the other big win for this book is Danny's artwork. It's just absolutely stunning and really captures the grit and feel of the story. And it's really, really, it's been, like I said, a surprisingly good book. Next up, we have Not All Robots, number 5, written by Mark Russell with artwork by Mike Deodato Jr. So this, so there's good news and bad news. So this is the final issue, and at the end of the issue, we now know, or now we found out that this is the end of the first story arc. So there is more to come, but it is left as a cliffhanger. So that's it. It's sad because there's some really interesting things. So what it is this the family that this book is centered about. The wife had killed one of the robots, so she's put on trial. And she's exiled from the city, the bubble. So she's out in the wasteland, post-apocalyptic. It's good. Everybody loves post-apocalyptic stories now. And so the kids say, well, screw you, Dad. We're going to go with Mom. So that's where this story goes to the end of this first story arc. And it's like it's satisfying in the sense of it's the end of the first story arc, but the next one's not going to be for a few months at least. So that's the disappointing part. I will say once again, I've really enjoyed this. It's really an interesting on social commentary about how humans and technology interact, and how things, robots are all great. And, it's kind of like, in a weird way, it's more of a social commentary of, like, say, the Terminator premise, but not as quite dark. I mean, it is really dark because there's some really messed up stuff. There's like the robot revolt, but it's more of like how they're but the robots are like humans too. So you have, even though they're robots, they have emotions like humans. So that's what's interesting about this story, is he's taking that Terminator premise, but the robots aren't just necessarily trying to kill people. There's the yin and yang of each side. So it's very interesting, and Diodato Jr.'s artwork has really been perfect for this book. And like I said, what I have loved about him doing the artwork on this book, it's really outside of his wheelhouse as far as, he's used to drawing superheroes. So this, I think, has been really good and really good to see him do this kind of story. And it's been a real joy. Like I said, it's a little disappointing that it didn't really end, but that's okay, because there's going to be more. So that tempers the sadness, because you're like, okay, there's more story coming. So I'm sure there's going to be a trade of that. So if you've missed it, because I know AWA does not really reprint books, I would definitely check out the trade on this. I'm a really huge fan of Russell, and this has been a really good story. Just know that this is going to continue. Next up, we have Soul Plumber number 4, written by Marcus Parks and Henry Zabowski, with artwork by PJ Holden and John McCrae. So I've been a really big fan of this book, but I will say, I really have to say that this 4th issue is really just batshit crazy, and I don't know what to even think of it, in the sense of, so what it is they go to this this religious thing where these people, and then there's just all this weird stuff that happens, and it's a very strange issue. I don't know what else to say, because I don't even know how this, it's almost like a side story to the main story. It's like there is elements of that main story that are going on, but then there's just this weird cult thing that they go to. And it kind of, for me, it's not that it was bad, it just really went a little too far out left field, in the sense of it really, I felt it got off track a little bit. I think the concept of this part of the story was an interesting concept. I don't know that it needed to be a full issue of that concept, and I think that's where I struggled with this within the story. I still like this book. I still think it's I love it because it's batshit crazy, but I think they went a little too far out on a subplot that maybe shouldn't have been a full story. Maybe it should have been part of the issue. And maybe they could have tempered it a little bit within 2 issues. I'm not sure. I'm still liking this book. I like a lot of the things. I think this issue was a bit unfocused, which was a little sad, but I still think it's definitely going along. So as long as they're able to get the story back on track in the next issue, I'll be fine. But like I said, I'm a little worried a little bit with this issue, but not totally. I don't think it's fallen off, because the first 3 issues were so good. So we'll kind of see. We'll come back and we'll review the 5th issue and see, fingers crossed that it kind of gets back on track. Next up, we have Mazebook number 5, written and drawn by Jeff Lemire. So this is the finale of this story, which has absolutely been amazing. And what's interesting about it is it's really about the journey of the father. Now, obviously, he's been looking for his daughter, which he thinks is alive, and in a way she is, but I think it's a journey of himself, and I think that's what's interesting. And I really don't want to give anything away. This book has been absolutely amazing in both story and art, but I think it ends so well. It ends on a beautiful note. I think that it's really, for me, it's a lot of like how, when you lose somebody in your life, how you grieve and how you deal with that. And I think that's what was interesting about this story. It's about life. It's about loss. It's about hope. It's about love. And Lemire takes all of these things and weaves it into an amazing story that just, it was just wonderfully, and it was beautiful. It was, and just very touching. And it was happy, it was sad, it was scary. He there were so many story elements that he played with here, and yet it was so focused and so poignant and spot on that it's just, I think this, he's done a lot of great work. I really love his work, but this was really, there was something special about this particular book, how it's 5 issues. It just had a great linear line through it, and it's really wonderful. So if you missed it, I know there's a hardcover coming out. I'm very excited about that, and it was really worth checking out. I really, really love this, and I know a lot of people are not huge fans of Lemire's artwork, but I love it when if he feels that he needs to draw a book, there's a reason, and this book is very much proof of why he needed to draw the book instead of having another artist do it, because his style was very perfect for this book. So just like I said, if you missed it, pick it up when it comes out. It's really, really amazing. And this is for me, one of the best books of last year. Next up, we have Nightwing 87, written by Tom Taylor with artwork by Bruno Redondo. Yes, Bruno is back. Thank God. Yes, we're back in Bloodhaven. We're back to Nightwing. We're done with all that going to Gotham crap that was just sad and disappointing because we didn't get Nightwing and all this stuff. So the interesting thing about this issue, so if you take this book apart and lay every page down next to each other, it's all one giant panel. Each panel is one panel. The story takes place within it. I will show pictures because it's hard to explain without the visuals. And so it goes along, and the story goes along with each one. It's every page is one panel, but it's one continuous panel. And so somebody steals the dog. The bad guys steal the dog. So of course Barbara and Dick are gonna go after him, and it's really wonderful to kind of be back. We're back to normal with the book, but I have to give Redondo, I've loved his work on this book. This book has really just shined with not only the story, Taylor's just knocking out of the park, but Bruno Redondo is bringing such an energetic style and fun to this book that just visually is just making it just pop. And this issue really was, it's kind of a gimmick, but damn if it doesn't work. And I loved it. I'm so happy that the team is back together and they're back to telling their stories. And it's just really, it's really just wonderful. And this issue it really kind of knocked my socks off. I'm a sucker for when you do a gimmick and it works. And when it works well, you get this, and it works exceptionally well here. And you should be reading this book. There's a hardcover that collects their first story arc. This has been a really, really wonderful book, and I'm really just every month I look forward to it. Next up, we have Superman, Son of Kal-El, number 6, written by Tom Taylor again, with artwork by John Timms. So this, obviously, the last issue was the big thing because he comes out as bisexual. We get to meet his boyfriend. And so that is great and everything. And I personally think it's great when you have diversity within superhero comics, especially because that's the big thing. But what I love that both the Taylor and Timms are doing here is that's now a part of his story. It always kind of has been. It wasn't a big shock when they announced it, because we kind of saw it with John. But I think the thing is that they're building upon that story, but they're also continuing the regular story, which has been quite good. This has been a really nice surprise because, whenever you do a book about like somebody's kid that has superpowers, it just ends up being like a pale imitation of Superman, where I that's what I love about Taylor's doing here. He's really making John his own character. And that is what is the most important. And he's telling a lot of things going on here because John is basically running the Superman family business while Kal-El is gone. So, but you know, they're not necessarily dwelling, oh, he's bisexual. Okay, great. That's fine. That's part of his character, but that's not his character entirely. And I love that Taylor is just like, okay, that's we've told that. We're moving on. We're keep going with the story. And it's been quite a good story, and this is a good issue. And I also love how he's having John have kind of deal with somewhat real world issues where it's more than just being a superhero book. And then you have Tim's artwork, which is really nice, continues to do a really bang up job on this book, and it's really good. We're gonna go to the next one quickly. We have Superman 78 number 5 continues to tell the stories of what would have been maybe post Richard Donner, past Superman 2. It's based on the universe, the Donner universe of the movies. They brought Brainiac in. He met his family because Brainiac has captured Krypton. I love it. It's a love letter to the Donner films. Vendetti. Oh, I'm sorry. It's written by Robert Vendetti and artwork by Wilfredo Torres. Vendetti is just he's really he this is a beautiful homage to those stories, but he's very much making it new and original, but keeping that homage, and you can hear the voices of the actors. Torres is just really, he does a great job of bringing this to life and making it's still very much his artwork, but he definitely there's times where you see Superman acting like Christopher Reeve, and it's really wonderful. It's just if you love, who doesn't love Superman from 78, and this is just a great love letter, and it's really been a great comic, so I can't wait to see how it finishes up. And finally, we have Supergirl Woman of Tomorrow number 6, written by Tom King, with artwork by Bilquis Evely. To say that this book is amazing is an understatement, because this issue deals with the post Krypton explosion, the death of the planet, but Kara's city and her father saved the city, but then there's the post of it, and it's really touching, because even though the current storyline of Supergirl and the girl trying to find they're trying to catch up to the killer of the girl's dad, but how I love how King is really telling a story of Kara and her life, and it's something that has never really been touched upon in comics, and he's done it with such style and emotions that it's just I don't want to really say much about the story, because it's just emotionally powerful, and you just don't see that in a lot of really mainstream comics. And I love the fact that he is giving Supergirl such great heft in this story, and we really learn about her as a character, which is just amazing. And Evely's artwork just continues to be just beautiful for this book. I can't imagine another artist, and I really have to hand it to King. He these matchups with these books he's doing and the artist are just so spot on. And this was really a touching issue, and this has been a really wonderful surprise, and I think it's honestly, I think one of the best Supergirl stories I have almost ever read. That's going to do it. Sorry it's long. It was a lot of books. I apologize for taking the time off, but hey, hopefully you all had a good holiday. Please, if you're not vaccinated, get vaccinated. If you have, please get boosted. Continue to wear your mask. Things are getting scary out there again. We need to get over this, folks. We need to get somewhat back to a normal. We want to go to conventions. We want to have in-store signings. But be safe out there. Please be safe out there. Take care of yourselves. It's so important right now to just continue to do everything, mask up, social distance, just be safe, be careful. It's getting scary again. So please be safe out there and take care of yourself. And as always, we leave our show with be kind. Before we leave our show, quick plug. I get all my comics at Pulp Fiction Comics in Long Beach. Ryan runs a great store there, and he'll tell you, hey, be kind too. But yes, please be kind to each other out there. Support your local comic shops. I support mine. I buy all my comics at Pulp Fiction, and Ryan runs a great store, and just be kind. Support your local comic shop. Be safe. We'll be back hopefully on a regular schedule this week. Things are calming down at work, so with the 9 to 5 job. So take care of yourselves, be kind, and we'll see you again next week. And that's it. Thanks. Bye bye.